Welcome to the Derek Loudermilk Show. Today's guest is Joel Salatin. Joel Salatin is perhaps the most famous and innovative farmer in the world. He describes himself as a Christian, libertarian, environmentalist, capitalist, lunatic farmer. He's the author of 15 books. He runs Polyface Farms in Virginia in the U.S., and he hosts the Beyond Labels podcast, and he speaks all over the world. He talks about regenerative farming, ecology, relationship, marketing, parenting, homesteading, food systems, bioethics, food emancipation, and more. So let's just get right into it. Here is Joel Salatin. So we lived all around the world. We lived in a bunch of different countries. We lived in Bali, Indonesia, and Croatia, and Portugal. And we happened to live, either in the middle of some farms or, in quite close proximity to these places. And when we were living in Bali, we found this beautiful, empty black sand beach. It was this rare secret beach we found. And I was there one day getting ready to go surfing. And I noticed this sort of mirage coming towards me down the beach. And I couldn't quite make out what it was at first, but it was, I would say it was about 200-300 ducks being herded down the beach by this local person. And he was keeping them in line with these flags. And they were walking down the beach, and it was one of the most amusing things. And they just kind of parted around me like the Red Sea and kept on going. And then he, directed them up with his semaphore flags, and they hopped into a rice paddy and just started going to town, eating down into the water in the rice paddy. Mm-hmm. And then as I lived there, I observed that this cycle of the process of growing rice, which they plant up to 3 times a year. Once they harvest the rice and they cut it and then they burn it, and then they let these ducks come in and sort of eat, I suppose, little insects and fertilize the field, and then they let it sit for a while and then replant. And it was so cool to see this whole cycle of the growing season of a particular crop like this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great story. That's a great story. Yeah, most of those what those ducks I think are eating mostly are snails. Snails attack the roots of the rice plants as parasitic, and of course the ducks love the snails, and so they basically sanitize the rice paddies.
Yeah, it's it was like a herd of tiny dinosaurs, coming towards me on the beach. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So another little bit of context I'll share with you. What brings you to my attention? I've heard of you and your work for a long time. People have been saying, you should get Joel Salatin on the show, and it just so happens that I think, like a lot of people, and maybe this will be part of our conversation, I'm thinking about getting a farm. I live in the city right now. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. And with a few other friends, we're working on a project to not just have a farm, but to have a sustainable community, a heart-centered community that's also sort of a healing retreat center. But personally, I'm also interested in doing, having space to do my own scientific research of various kinds, and just imagining getting a plot of land somewhere in Tennessee, not too far from where you are. And I don't know that much about the farming side of things, the regenerative, a lot of these properties we're looking at have what appears to be depleted soils or sort of rocky or sandy soils. And I think part of our goal would be to have a diverse and healthy ecosystem to surround our lives with. And it seems that you're the perfect person to comment and access your wisdom for these types of things.
Sure. Well, thank you. Yes. Anybody that knows our story knows that when we came here in 1961, this was an absolute gullied rock pile. It was known as the armpit of the community, and in my lifetime, I have watched the transformation of, the erosion eliminated, rocks covered up with soil, and what was the armpit is now, arguably the most verdant, abundant farm in the region. So I'm not saying that pridefully. I'm saying that as a humble servant of the ecology, that to express the desire of our ecological womb, if you will, to heal and to reward our efforts. We have this notion so much today that nature is a reluctant partner, and I've got to wrestle nature into this, apple crop or, whatever, whatever I'm doing. And actually nature's it's a benevolent lover that just wants to be caressed in the right places. And so a lot of this is, how do I caress you into the abundance that you want to give me? That it's a very symbiotic thing.
And I'm sure a lot more people are thinking like you do. But for a while, you were sort of a renegade in a sense, doing things the opposite way of your neighbors. When do you think more and more people started shifting to see things how you see them?
Well, we're still very much the renegade and doing things opposite of our conventional neighbors. I think what has changed is just the awareness in the broader culture of this. And I mean, there are so few farmers today. I mean, you got to realize our country now has almost twice as many people incarcerated in prisons as we have farmers. And, and it gives you pause. I wrote a book, You Can Farm, and it gives me pause to realize I'd have had twice as many potential buyers for that book if I'd have written a book on You Can Be a Successful Inmate, Oh and so when you have that few a number of people actually engaged in agriculture, actually out on the farm, it doesn't take very many thousands of new urban interest to create a bit of a tsunami. And that's what we've got right now is I call it an urban tsunami that's flooding into the countryside, especially into Florida, Texas, and Tennessee, and other places as well. Certainly there's an influx into the Oregon and Idaho out of California, mm-hmm. Oklahoma as well. But the basic concept is here, when a we've kind of got this saying, when a culture gets the jitters, when you get the jitters, where do you head for the hills, right? When you get the jitters, you don't head to the city. And I'm not opposed to cities. I don't hate cities. In fact, I'm glad it takes cities to provide art, literature, civilizational, things. But you don't need as much of a percentage of the population living in cities to reap the benefits of cities that we have today. And so I think that this move of both people and their resources, their skill sets, their money, all of that, coming back to the countryside is a very, very good thing. And I don't know, I would never guess to say what's the perfect ratio of rural versus urban. I don't know what the ratio is, but I think that it needs to be a lot different ratio than we're seeing in our country, and so keeping these rural areas viable is a big deal. So what's happening is people are, when you get concerned, you start looking at resiliency. Resiliency becomes as important as efficiency. We've talked about efficiency for so long. And now we're realizing that if all you talk about is efficiency, you actually end up toward fragility. We don't make things domestically anymore. We depend on foreign countries and geopolitical things and big energy bills and somebody else's skill sets. And especially when it comes to food, no society has ever had successful longevity when it couldn't feed itself. And right now in the U.S., for the first time in our history, 25%, that's 1 in 4 spoonfuls of food, 25% of our food is now produced somewhere else, not in the U.S. We import now 25% of our food. So we are, as a nation, this in this abundance place, we are ourselves becoming more and more vulnerable to these vagaries of geopolitical kind of things. And so what happens when you're looking for resilience is you begin very quickly looking for proximate existence to people who know how to grow things, build things, and fix things. And so the ultimate resilience is when you have nearness and proximity to that eclectic kind of comprehensive skill set, mastery of growing, fixing, and building. And it doesn't mean that you can pull the plug on the greater, on the world. That you can't be a total island, but you can at least be the last guy standing. And there's a little bit of comfort in being the last guy standing, because you hope by the time you're the last guy standing, some smart person figured out how to keep you standing, by the time you're the last guy standing. That's kind of the way, innovation and that sort of thing is. So, here we are, and it's certainly COVID has accelerated. I think this was a trend that was slowly developing, but it really accelerated under COVID. I mean, in the year 2020, 1 million backyard flocks of chickens started. Think about that. 1 billion backyard flocks of chickens. If you say the average flock is 6 chickens, that's 6 million chickens. If I had the calculator here, let's see, 6, 1, 2, 3 million divided by 12 is 500,000 dozen eggs. So if they lay it at 50%, that's 250,000 dozen eggs a day. And if they're worth $4 a dozen, that's $1 million a day.
Wow.
I mean, that's when people say, "Oh, come on, this small scale homesteading, foo-foo, fluffy, woo-woo farming can't feed the world." I mean, that's the kind of figure you need to point out. And that's just the new backyard flocks of chickens. That's not old ones. Lehman's, Lehman's in Ohio, they're the number one non-electric supplier probably in the world. And in 2020, they sold, listen to this, they sold the same number of canning jar lids that they normally sell in 10 years. They sold them in 1 year.
Wow.
I mean, that's pretty cool. So when you're frustrated and depressed about COVID, I mean, for those of us who've been, preaching resiliency and localization and community, real, authentic community development, I couldn't be more excited. These are really neat trends, and sometimes you need a catalyst to kind of, move a trend forward.
Yeah, and it's amusing for me because you're describing essentially our experience of, we live in a city. The meeting point for people to start rioting is at the end of our block. So, that's not a really safe or comfortable place to be if shit hits the fan. And then I'm like, well, maybe I should learn to grow some stuff. So we started, planting different things in our city backyard and learning various stuff, and potatoes and tobacco and tomatoes and all these various things. And pretty soon I realized, like, we would eat through all this food real quick if we needed to. Planning 50 square feet is not going to do it. So here's a question: let's say we're building this community, and we eventually expect, 50 people to be living in some sort of village type setting. How much land would we need to farm to feed those 50 people?
Oh, wow. Well, obviously it depends a little bit on your diet preferences, but of course, I'm a livestock guy. I mean, we have a personal garden, but and we have fruit trees and things like that. So, I think what you need to do. Look, I don't have the exact number. I mean, in general, to supply a completely well-rounded diet of, dairy, meat, poultry, produce, fruit, things like that. You're probably in the neighborhood of maybe an acre a person.
Okay.
So, 50 people, 50 acres. It's not as much as you think, because as permaculture teaches, we can stack things. So the same acre that carries the cow will also carry the chickens and the turkeys and the fruit trees. The fruit trees can act as trellises for grapevines, and sheep and chickens can be under the fruit trees, and shade tolerant vegetables can grow under the fruit trees. You want to keep your lettuce. You want to keep your lettuce and cabbage from bolting in July in Tennessee. We'll grow them in some shade under an apple tree, and it'll be a lot cooler, and they won't bolt. And so you take advantage of these stacking, these multi-level microclimates, and you can really stimulate a lot of production. I mean, John Jevons, the guru of French biointensive gardening. I don't know what he finally got down to on his numbers, but it was pretty low per person. I don't know, 50 square feet. That's maybe 100 square feet. That'd be 10 by 10. It was really low. Wow. With real intensity, companion planting. Singing Frogs Farm out in Petaluma, California. They get 12 harvests a year per square foot. But they start everything in little, soil containers, grow pots. Mm-hmm. And so that they never plant a seed. They never plant a seed in their garden. Well, you think about it, it takes, for most vegetables, it takes most of 3 weeks or so, for the seed to germinate and kind of get up, break ground, and where you lock out. Oh yeah. We've got beets here, to get your third or fourth leaf up there. Well, they do all that in soil blocks. That's where I was looking for, in soil blocks in a hoop house. And so they're never planting seeds into the garden, and that accelerates accelerates the harvest, and it reduces the amount of wait time between seed and harvest that's using your really critical garden space. So you concentrate in soil blocks, get all your seed started, and then when you set out, the plant is already at early juvenile stage, and so you reduce your square footage requirement to get that cabbage or beet or whatever it is. You reduce it from 75 or 80 days. You reduce it down to 40 days, and that's huge when your space is precious. Mm-hmm. So that's the idea.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And that's reminding me, another part of the rice growing I saw in Indonesia was they physically plant a tiny little field, and then they pull it all up, and then they space it out and plant the full fields. And it's a very human intensive. They have a team of 4 or 6 that come out and plant a field. And one thing I've heard you talk about is, one of the difference between the factory farming is that you're not necessarily relying on mechanization and fuel and fertilizing. You're putting more of your man hours and paying attention to things. So it's more human time intensive, your type of farming. Is that right?
Yeah. I'm not sure how to, what we do. Yes. If all farming were done our way, there would be per pound, for pound or bushel of production, there would be more people on farms. But that's not to suggest that there wouldn't be, that there are more people involved overall. For example, if we replace, for example, pesticides with human management, well, all those people running laboratories making pesticides, the people advertising pesticides, the people selling pesticides, the people administering the test to get a pesticide applicator's license. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Those people now don't need a job. And so I'm not sure that overall, what it does is it puts more people in direct contact with production. It puts more people on the land, but does a pound of potatoes take more actual human effort? If you grow it from compost by hand than it does in an Idaho, 500 acre potato farm. I'm not sure. You take away all the people that had to build the machine, the potato harvesting machine, and all the people who had to drill for the oil to fuel the machine. You know what I'm saying? Overall, I'm not sure that's the case. But it certainly does require more, eyes per square foot, eyes per acre, on the farm itself, which I don't apologize for. I think that's a good thing. I think we'd probably, if we had more eyes looking at our food, we might have better food. The fact that our food is largely grown behind no trespassing signs and razor wire fences probably gives license for a lot of cheating to go on.
Well, I appreciate you, naming specifically some of those externalities or some of those parts of the commercial food system that are not necessarily apparent. That's great to just sort of show that there may be just the same amount of work going on, but the way that the energy in food flows is perhaps different. Right. Part of the reason I'm asking is because a lot of the people that I expect to come to our farm community will not be full-time farmers, that it'll be, we all have multiple careers, projects, entrepreneurs going. And so I'm kind of wondering, can we all be part-time farmers? I'm like you, I'm writing books and speaking tours and running podcasts and all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. I expect to continue doing that. So,
yeah. And you'll probably feature a lot of the things that you're learning in the farm village. It'll give you new and exciting content that right now, for example, it's hard to come by, for example. So, So yeah, I'm totally with you. On our farm, we employ about 25 people here, and but a lot of them are not directly farming. You've got salespeople, you've got accounting, social media, delivery truck drivers. We have one full-time mechanic, who fixes all the machinery. One full-time maintenance guy who fixes the flapping roofs and oversees construction. If we're going to build a shed or a barn or a building or something. And so while they're not out moving cows and collecting eggs, their expertise is no less valuable. The guy who can fix the egg gathering bucket is certainly as valuable as the person that's going to put the eggs in the bucket. And so, so we don't say that one skill is whatever more valuable than another. They're actually all sacred, and it takes a lot of different skill sets to make a team go. And so, yeah, I think what you will probably do, you'll see in a micro scale, you will see a kind of a gravitation based on skill set, passion, interest, for different people. And some of you may not do really much of any farming.
Mm-hmm.
Farming, hardcore, hands in the dirt, and others will just take to it like a disciple, and just run with that. And so you'll have, we see it here. We have people, for example, we had an apprentice this year who just really took an interest in the inventory. We inventory, we have, a huge, we have, 4-5 walk-in freezers full of, beef, pork, chicken, duck, rabbit, inventory. And she just really took an interest in that. And so she has stayed on now as kind of inventory. She packs all the boxes that we ship, to customers, and handles the inventory. And my goodness, she was able to organize and find space. We were wasting space, and she just has made things, 40-50% more efficient, organized in that very, very expensive, walk-in freezer space. So, does she love farming? Absolutely. But she's really gifted and loves this taking chaos and making it orderly. And obviously you can apply that to a farm, but in this case, she's applied it beautifully to our walk-in freezer inventory, and it's just wonderful. So yeah, there will not be, there will be people in that village that are gifted at teaching children. And so, for example, we have one full-time former apprentice here. She's been here 10 years now, and she's full-time. She does our what we call our grass stains tours. They started out as school tours for children, and then they've morphed now. With COVID, they don't come, but she's kind of pivoted and repositioned it, and she did 125 tours this summer. These are paid 2-hour tours. And they're, and she organizes them, handles them, does it all. So she's not moving cows. She's not gathering eggs, but she did do that. She's very knowledgeable about it, but she really loves taking people around the farm, explaining what we're doing to them. And that's her full-time thing. She loves it. And I keep waiting for her to come. Each year I say, man, are you tired of this yet? Oh no, this is the greatest thing. And so a lot of the trick to this is providing a platform that allows people to find what will make them tap dance out of bed every morning.
That's a Warren Buffettism, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing those stories. Makes total sense. And I can already see, I have a little 3-year-old daughter. She takes care of her stuffed animals like farm animals. I feel like she's probably going to be the one tending the goats and the sheep and stuff.
Yeah. And that if those various niches are not forced, people will naturally gravitate to those things. I mean, our both of our guys, I said we got a one full-time mechanic and one full-time maintenance guy. Both those guys were farm apprentices, 15 years ago. But they really liked, one's a gearhead. I mean, you tell him we got to tear this engine apart and replace the clutch, man, he's all over it. He can't imagine anything that'd make his day happier than ripping into an engine, and changing the transmission. That's where he naturally gravitated to. And the other one is just really, he's a woodworking wizard. I mean, he can do anything with wood. And so, he doesn't gather eggs either. But boy, we've got some of the prettiest farm signs and cute little structures and things. I mean, people that know me know I have no carpentry skills whatsoever. I'm a totally functional. I've told Teresa, I said, every guy would like to build his bride a house, but if I built you one, sweetie, you'd never want to live in it. And so, all of my stuff is functional, but Buzz's stuff is like art. It's like sculpture. And so, we really appreciate having that talent here. So all the people in the village, will gravitate to their expertise and their passion, as long as you don't force it. And so the trick here is to provide a platform that offers a place of service for as varied a skill set and interest as comes there.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you sit down and say, well, we really need this in our village. Well, if you don't have the person that wants to take that on, let it ride. Eventually, if that niche is supposed to be filled, somebody will come and arrive and do that. And otherwise you'll be forcing it, and people, you'll be saying, well, we need this job done. We need this job done. And as you force it, then people will start doing things that they're not, isn't their heart. And then you get burnout and frustration and depression and, all sorts of things.
Which defeat the purpose. Yeah. That's so beautiful, just to make things easy like that. And, I'm curious what your favorite part is these days.
Oh, my favorite part. My favorite part now is just watching the results of a lifetime of investment. And I don't mean financial investment. I mean investing in stopping erosion over here, building a pond over there. I remember when all the, and we're still building ponds, but now we have ponds that are, that I remember when I was, when we were starting out. So they're, 30, 40 years old. And you remember the day that you built it and it looked very sterile. And now it's got, tadpoles and frogs and cattails and red-winged blackbirds and the wild ducks are building, nests. And so, for me, it's just being immersed in a nest that has responded to a lifetime of care. Now, I still have my responsibilities. We've actually written job descriptions for everybody. And in a family business like this, it's easy to get whatever, where you start farming by committee and one person wants this done, one person wants this done. And then next thing you're at cross purposes. And so, years ago, we actually created, job descriptions, and at the top, so I have about, 10 things that are my responsibility. And, but my top one, the number one, is chief visionary. That's a pretty cool job description. I'm chief visionary. So what that means is I'm the most expendable one. Day-to-day operations. I'm the one that doesn't have to ask, hey, I need to be gone on Tuesday. Can I be gone? I'm the only one that doesn't have to ask that. I just go whenever I want to, because day-to-day operations are not my that's my son's responsibility. Now, Daniel is in charge. His number one is, chief of day-to-day operations. So he has to make sure that day-to-day flow gets done. I don't anymore, but I'm still chief negotiator. I negotiate agreements and contracts, leases and things like that. And of course, I do a lot of writing and writing. I write numerous columns and edit the Stockman Grass Farmer and things like that. I'm still a chief chainsaw guy. So, my calluses are real. They're nice and strong and heavy. And so when we need chainsaw work, I'm the chainsaw guy and I love it. I pretty much move our cow herd here. So I do that every day, move the cow herd, set up the fences and that sort of thing here at the home hub place. It's a combination of outdoor and indoor, but it used to be that I was outside almost all the time. Today, I'm probably outside only on average, probably a third of the time. And I'm inside 2/3 doing, administrative and different, wheeling and dealing and visioning, as they say.
There you go. All right. That sounds appealing to me. And, thanks for sharing that. So ponds, you're making ponds? Ponds, I'm assuming then are beneficial in some way. What's up with the ponds?
Oh my, yeah. Well, ponds. So when you can't have biology without water. Water is, one of the foundational things to life. And of course, most places on the planet are short of water. They're not over. Now there are places that do have, the Netherlands has too much water most of the time, but most places on the planet are starved for water. And so generally when you say, well, let's get water, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, let's dig a well. And so what I promote, let digging a well be your last option, not your first option. And so the first option is a pond. And most people don't realize the amount of water that you can store in a pond with a very small watershed. So, on average, 1/3 of all the raindrops that hit the ground, this is a global average. Okay. One third of the raindrops run off the surface. 2/3 go in the ground, 1/3 run off the surface. And that's the same in deserts and, wherever. That's just a kind of a global benchmark. They run off those raindrops run off. They run a surface runoff because either they're coming too fast and the soil can't absorb them, or the soil is already saturated and it can't absorb any more. And so if you're in a, like where you're talking about in Tennessee is probably about a 45-inch rainfall area. That means that, and just to make it real simple, if we just say east of the Mississippi, the average is over 30 inches of rainfall per acre, rainfall a year, east of the Mississippi. 1/3 of those raindrops would be 10 inches a year, right? Runs off. Now, by definition, water that's running off is essentially wasted water. It either it becomes a flood problem in a heavy rain. It becomes an erosion issue. So if you trap runoff water, so I'm not talking about damming up streams and rivers and creeks and things. I'm saying just surface runoff. You got a valley, the water channels into a place, you catch that runoff. By definition, if you're catching only surface runoff, you are not hoarding water. You are not stealing water from downstream. You are actually just, when the cup of the commons is full and overflowing, you're simply taking that overflow and putting it in a bank account called a pond. All right. Well, how much is that? Well, 1 acre inch of water is 30,000 gallons. So imagine 1 inch deep over an acre is 30,000 gallons. So 10 inches is 300,000 gallons. So if you're east of the Mississippi, on average, every single acre east of the Mississippi is surface runoffing 300,000 gallons per year. That's a lot of water. And so it doesn't take a very big watershed, 3, 4, 5 acres, and that will feed a pretty good sized pond. Now that valley area, might only have a runoff maybe 5 days in a year, 7, 8 days in a year. That's all. But I know there are times in the year when you step out and there's water running everywhere. Right. Yep. And when that happens, if you can hold that, another permaculture concept is we want to hold the raindrops as high on the landscape as possible for as long as possible. So the higher you hold them on the landscape, the more uses you can get out of that raindrop as it gravitationally moves to the ocean. If you don't hold it and it just runs as fast as it can run downhill, you don't really get any benefit from it. In fact, you get a lot of problems from it in flooding and things like that. And so we are pond lovers. A lot of people don't realize that 500 years ago, North America, the surface area of North America was a little over 8% water. Today, we're less than 4%. So, I mean, and that's with all the Army Corps of Engineers projects, the Tennessee Valley Authority, big lakes, all those huge, big man-made lakes we have now. Even with all of them, we're still less than half of the surface water that we had 500 years ago.
Was it in ponds 500 years ago?
Yeah, they were beaver ponds. Beaver ponds. And because we had 200 million beavers. Think about that. 200 million beavers. In fact, 500 years ago, beavers ate more, I'll just say vegetables. I mean, they weren't carrots, but it was they're herbivores. So yes. Those 200 million beavers ate as much vegetable material as all the humans in North America today. So, it should give us all pause to realize that 500 years ago, North America produced, on the land base that we have now, we produced more food 500 years ago than we do today. Now, it wasn't all eaten by humans. Like I said, it was eaten by beavers. We had 2 million wolves, each of whom needed 20 pounds of meat a day. Well, that's 40 million pounds of meat a day. Okay. We had 7-8 million bison, elk. We had birds, passenger pigeons. John Audubon sat under a tree in 1820, and he wrote in his diary, he said, "I haven't seen the sun for 3 days because the flock of birds flying over is so large it's blocked out the sun for 3 days."
Whoa!
I mean, that makes, that kind of puts Tyson chicken in perspective. When you realize that level of abundance, and so it should give us all pause to realize that there was more food produced 500 years ago than we do today, even with John Deere tractors, chemical fertilizers, and genetically modified organisms and factory farms. So our goal here is to figure out what those templates of abundance were, and using modern technology, how can we, like a track loader to build a pond, okay, how can we bring back that level of abundance? How can we restore that level of abundance and do it, without negatives like, chemicals and that sort of thing. And so that's kind of where we are. And so the ponds, I mean, so I'm a pondaholic, we've built everywhere we go, we build ponds. And Louis Bromfield wrote about this back in the 1950s. He said the answer to the flooding on the Mississippi is not big Army Corps of Engineer projects along the Mississippi, because you're already too far down the pipeline. You've got too much volume and velocity for us to stop. He said the answer to the flooding on the Mississippi are millions of little farm ponds, 300 to 800,000 gallons, little quarter-acre farm ponds all over the Ohio and Mississippi river valleys, and so imagine them like big cow footprints, all over the landscape, and all of those catching the water way high up on the landscape, where it can be used.
Wow, that's fascinating. Have you thought about bringing beavers into your farmscape?
Well, the problem with beavers is that they don't always build stuff where you want it. In fact, a lot of times they build stuff exactly where you don't want it. We've had beavers here a couple of times, and one time they were actually building in a great spot, and so we enjoyed them for a couple of years, and they actually dammed up an area that we needed to be able to get across to access a field, and so we kind of built a causeway across there with a culvert in it, and then we suddenly found out that they were plugging up our culvert, and so that's when the beavers had to go. But there are a lot of places that beavers can be great aids, and they're amazing, and their ponds are amazing. But unfortunately, they don't always go and build where you want them to build. There are plenty of places I'd love to see beavers come in and build, but
fair enough.
I can't make them build where I want to. And the thing about beavers too is, unlike excavation equipment, beavers always build in running water, so they're always damming up an existing stream or a creek or something like that. Whereas with excavation equipment, we can come and build a dam in a dry valley that only has surface runoff, and so we're not in. So we can go higher on the landscape than a beaver would, because beavers don't build where there's no water. They go where there is water and make more water. We can go where there's no water and make water. So I don't want to act like I'm one better than the beaver, but this is where the use of technology. We look at what the beavers have done. We appreciate it. We applaud it. But with technology, we can go maybe a little step better using the same template, but moving it just a little better with technology.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm reminded, I just finished this book talking about what Americans, like Indians, but also just what was here, sort of agriculturally gave to the rest of the world. And I'm reminded of the story about why beavers were so popular for trappers. And it's because the umbrella hadn't been invented yet, and everyone needed felt hats. And beavers were the only animals that had that, like the long fibers to make the felts for all the Europeans. And so that's why all the trappers got the beavers, is because the Europeans needed for their top hats.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that's a long-winded way to ask you. There's a lot of wisdom from native peoples to be accessed, which may or may not be. What, if any, are you able to take from sort of like very traditional practices from sort of original populations?
Well, fascinating question. I think, first of all, I think that you and I, unless you're a master herbologist or an herbalist, I think that probably native medicine had as much to offer as anything, to know what medicinal plants were.
Yeah.
And I think that the Europeans, when they came, missed or I say when we came, missed a golden opportunity. We were so hyped up on the apothecary that we did not appreciate the advantage of native herbal remedies that obviously the Native Americans enjoyed and have been practicing for a long, long time. So that's certainly one is just basic edible and medicinal plants. That was certainly one item. A second item was the management of the herds using fire. Stephen Pine wrote a book, Fire in America, that goes way back archaeologically and anthropologically back into early. And a lot of people, Disney has destroyed our psyche with, Bambi and all that. Actually, except right during the fire, as soon as the fire passes, fire actually attracts wildlife because they want to come and lick the charcoal. They get minerals that way. And so the Native American, a lot of the burning that the Native Americans did was actually as a wildlife management tool to attract them to an area, freshen an area up. And it was attracted. In fact, my mentor, Alan Nation, who founded the Stockman Grass Farmer magazine, said that if you could have flown a drone over the United States, let's say 500 years ago, you would have thought the Native Americans were using electric fence on the bison because the fires never burned in a straight line. They would come up to an area and they had a real jagged edge. Well, the bison followed the fresh grass. They didn't want that old junk over there, and so they would follow this fresh grass. And so if you could have flown a drone over these massive herds of bison, 5 million, 6 million head, these herds of bison actually would have looked like they were being controlled by electric fence the way they moved across that burned mosaic of the landscape without going into the unburned area. And then when the unburned area got up enough, then they'd burn that. And fire was the Native Americans' chainsaw. That was the way they could actually control the trees and weed out the trees and make sure that the trees were good, that were growing. As a lover of trees and wood and forests, one of the most interesting things that I appreciate from the Native American is that the Native Americans' forestal economy was all about small stuff, not big stuff. And I mean, they didn't have chainsaws, right? In fact, they didn't even have steel. And so for a Native American, you walk up to a 3-foot diameter tree, that was pretty impregnable. What are you going to do with a 3-foot diameter tree? In fact, we have stories of entire, Indian villages spending like a week tending a fire around the base of a big tree, to bring it down. And so the whole village would be involved with, like, for a week of stoking this fire, bringing stuff to stoke this fire around the base of the tree. It'd finally burn through and then the tree would fall over. And so the whole Native American forestal wood economy was based on little stuff, teepee poles, little dragging poles, sticks and things that you could carry. And then the fire, which killed small stuff, diseased stuff, weak stuff, and kind of opened up the woods. In fact, the first Europeans who came to North America said that they could take that would be a European continental army from the Atlantic coast to the Mississippi without ever needing a road, because the forests were not weedy. They were open. And this is where the permaculturalists have the idea of we need more forests and fewer trees. Our forests are weedy, and that's why they're on fire. That's why they're burning, especially out west, because we're not cutting. We have a no cut policy on so many places that the load, before Europeans came, it's estimated that the Native Americans burned 4 million acres of California. Of course, it wasn't California back then, but they burned 4 million acres of California every single year. Think about that, 4 million acres. Well, from 1950 to 2000, only something like the figure's going to escape me, but it's under 500,000 acres a year burned in California. For 50 years, only 500,000 acres burned for 50 years compared to what had happened for millennia up until then was 4 million acres. So you wonder why the West is on fire. We're burning up everything. It's because we have had this multi-decade no fire period of time, and the fuel loads have just built up to completely, crazy proportions, and nature's going to last. I mean, those are fire. They respond to fire. You don't want to burn them every year, but fire is a tool, and the Native Americans use that very adeptly. So what I'm getting at with this forestal thing is, in that the pre-European forestal economy was all about using and burning and handling. The value was in small wood, not big wood. When the Europeans came with steel, with saws, they wanted boards. They wanted, and if you're going to cut lumber, if you're going to cut boards, you want big stuff, not little stuff. And so from a forest ecology standpoint, what has happened since the Europeans came is that we have taken so the Native Americans took the little stuff and left the big stuff. The Europeans, we have taken the big stuff and left the little stuff. And so over time, we have reduced those great, cathedral trees, cathedral forests, and we have mongrelized our forestal genetics so much now that many foresters think we don't even have the genetics left to regrow those magnificent trees, that our ancestors, encountered on their first forays into that. So, that's look, the Indians didn't sit down one day and said, let's create a small forest economy. Nobody sat around and created a white paper, right, on doing this. It was just natural in them. But what it did, it for centuries and centuries, it selected, it incentivized healthy, beautiful big trees and de-incentivized the little stuff. And today we incentivize the big healthy stuff, we harvest the big healthy stuff. Right. We're constantly culling out the big and healthy stuff and letting the junky stuff grow. And so our woods are becoming more and more weedy by the year. It's gotcha. Kind of a long answer. Yeah. But I find that perspective, that kind of stroll down history lane, and to realize, what it does when you accumulate that kind of management over an entire landscape, what an effect it has. It's huge. Yeah.
I'm curious, how much of your land is in forest?
So we own 950 acres, and 700 is in forest, and 250 is open.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
A lot of trees.
Yeah.
And in general, I think, especially east of the Mississippi, if not everywhere, in general, 25% of a farm should be forest. Roughly 25%.
Or a lot more. You mean?
Well, I'm minimal. Yeah. Okay. But for a lot of reasons. I mean, there's everything from airflow to transpiration to biomass, lumber production, fungal development. Fungi live in woods. Bacteria live in open land, and the best soil has both fungi and bacteria. So if you're depleted from your forest land, you can't get enough fungi. I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons, but in general, I think that a healthy farm should have, 25% of it should be in woods. And when you think about the number of farms that aren't 25% woods, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, like most of the Midwest, it seems like.
Yeah. And here, there are actually some woods that ought to be open for the same reason, that ought to be opened up, ridge tops and things like that. I mean, the Appalachians here where we live, the Blue Ridge and Allegheny Mountains, all the ridges were called balds. They were called balds, and they were balds because the Native Americans burned them to keep the trees off of the tops, because that's where the bison would go in the hot summer, because the tops were cooler than down in the valley. So the bison would migrate up to these balds, and so the grass meadows up in those high terrain areas were an attractant and a place to where they could be sure that even on a hot summer day they could go get a buffalo if they wanted it, or a deer or an elk or whatever.
Yeah, and there's also a little bit more flat terrain there than the sides of the.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the sides are more wooded, and the valleys are open, and the tops are open, and okay. that's kind of the. And, cool. and trees act as hydraulic pumps. When the trees are on the side of a hill, the trees actually pump water from low ground and tend to pump it uphill. And so, so there's an advantage of the trees on the side of a hill. Mm-hmm.
Cool. I love how all this stuff is fitting together. And you've cited, you seem to be well versed in history. You've cited several books so far in our conversation, and your job title is visionary. So I'm curious about the process of which you, continue to seek out new knowledge, and also sort of where you are doing experiments or where you're applying your own creativity. If you could speak to either of those.
Well, I'm a voracious reader. And so, I continue to read aggressively and broadly. I don't read a lot of fiction. Most of it's nonfiction, but I read very broadly and eclectically, and it's in the reading eclectically that you're able to connect broader dots, if you will. If you view your information base, let's say as a tool belt. Let's say you got a tool belt here, and the different things that are different tools on that tool belt. You have a much better chance of completing a project if you have more tools on your belt, and in fact, a project that you wouldn't want to tackle if all you had on your belt was a hammer becomes possible if you have a hammer, a saw, and a screwdriver, right? And so I think that there's a facilitation or an accelerator, if you will, an accelerator in our brains when we get more things in our tool belt. And so we're talking about reading history, business, self-improvement, obviously, farming, hardcore farming, for me, how to manage grass, those kinds of things, including visiting people, going to seminars, listening to podcasts. Okay. But this is all part of stocking additional tools on our informational tool belt. And that then creates a project. It creates broader project opportunities that you wouldn't have if you had a much more simplistic tool belt. So how do I feed my own imagination? It's by reading the imagination of others. And what are other people? I mean, there's really nothing new, right? We just put things together differently. I mean, there's really nothing new under the sun. It's just how we synthesize it. And so I'm just looking for, broad ideas that I can customize to my own situation and say, we could maybe try that. I mean, a great example is, for example, pasture cropping. Pasture cropping was developed by an Australian guy named Colin Seiss, and it came out of a crisis. He had a fire go through. He's a sheep and a small grain farmer in Australia, and a fire came through and burned all of his equipment. It burned his wheat crop. It burned his wheat storage bins, burned everything. So he wakes up the next morning and says, well, man, what am I going to do now? And so he decided to see if he could start with as little machinery as possible. So he used his sheep to eat the grass and actually weaken it. I don't want to belabor this, but he used the animals as a sod weakening tool strategically long enough that he could get a wheat crop in, or barley, or small grain. And I actually visited his farm, and it was we're standing in this beautiful field of oats. It looks as beautiful as anything, but there was no tillage, no fertilizer, and the sod had not been killed. It was still under there. So then when he went and harvested the oats, the grass was already coming, and he was able to graze it with the sheep. So he was able to get 2 crops instead of 1 in the season. And the one that he got with the sheep added so much manure that it would fertilize. And then, he'd do that for like 4 or 5 years, and then he'd raise another wheat crop in that field. So we brought that here. Now, we didn't raise wheat. We didn't need wheat, but we wanted to fill our summer slump niche with when things got dry and hot. What is something we can grow an annual that we could grow in our perennial to fill that summer slump, in late July, early August? Well, Sudex. Sudex is a Sudan sorghum hybrid, hot, heat tolerant grass, tropical grass. Okay. So we went out with the cows. We didn't have sheep, but we did with the cows what Colin did with the sheep, and weakened the sod enough to get this Sudex in. The Sudex grew 8 feet tall. My goodness, we ran 100 cows on a quarter of an acre through that stuff in late July, early August. It was tremendous. It was massive material. Put all this biomass on the ground. Did not kill the sod. Did not require any fertilizer. The cows were happy. They got all these wonderful carbohydrates in July when they're starving for carbohydrates, and it added 30 tons per acre of manure and urine just from the grazing animal. And so those are the kinds of things. If you're reading, if you're listening to podcasts, if you're traveling, if you're going to visit mentors, if you're in that seeking mode, you will find those little breakthroughs that will let you punch through your wall, and it's a really neat thing.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I sort of put something together listening to a podcast you were on about Ty Lopez, because he's someone that I learned from in the internet marketing world. But he was always referring to one of his early mentors. I think that might be you. And he's done a lot to teach, I think, inner city kids to think about using different sources of knowledge to build, exactly what you're talking about, getting people to learn how to speed read and accumulate knowledge in that way. Was he one of the early apprentices on your farm?
Yeah, he was our very first formal apprentice back, about 27, 28 years ago. And yeah, so he occupied a very special niche here as being the first formal, when we actually built the apprentice cottage house and actually started the formal apprentice program. He was the very first one. And we're still great friends. We stay in touch. I'm working on a project with him right now. And we just think the world of Ty. He's talk about a quintessential entrepreneur, whatever, a guy, innovator. Ty is a great, and I mean, I love to listen to him. I love to listen to him talk. I love to listen to what he says. Because again, he weaves out everything from Aristotle to Mother Teresa, and that's a pretty eclectic thing. Here's the thing, Derek. I think most of us tend to we want to stay in our comfort zone. Self-improvement people call it stay in our silos. We love to stay in our silos, and this is why, for example, years ago, I created and took on. I made this moniker for me of Christian libertarian environmentalist capitalist lunatic farmer, because I got tired of pigeonholes, and I might say one thing that makes me sound like a communist, and the next thing I'm sound like a libertarian, and it's not just simplistic. And Ty talks a lot about this, of not seeing everything as black and white. And our culture right now is extremely fragmented to where it does seem like there's a lot of black and white, but there's a lot of stuff that's there are things that are black and white. I mean, you probably shouldn't steal and you probably shouldn't kill somebody, but other than that, there's a lot of things that are not black and white, and so how do we get to a place in our own mind where we have an idea worth trying? Well, we read eclectically, broadly, so read stuff from people. I've got stuff on my shelf from people that I'm in complete disagreement about, that people who call me a murderer for killing animals. Okay. But I want to read their stuff because I want to know what they're thinking. Okay. And that way too, when I'm in a debate situation with one of them, I'm able to, to understand what they're about, i.e., walk in their shoes for a little bit. And so, I read stuff, liberals, conservatives, it's abroad because it's not just always simple. And our culture we love to find our box and then sit in that box. The sooner we can find that box, one of the most interesting things I did one time, I was asked by I tend to be libertarian, pretty conservative, politically, small government. But I had this friend, he was a liberal Democrat. He was in the Virginia General Assembly, and he called me. So this guy was a small farmer, and he wanted to get some of his beef butchered, and he couldn't. There wasn't a slaughterhouse around to do it, and he got to checking in. And why are these slaughterhouses gone? Well, it's because the state regulatory climate is so bad it runs them all out of business. These small ones, and so he kind of started a campaign. Again, he was a delegate. He wasn't not a senator. He did become a senator later, but at that time he was a delegate, and he started a campaign kind of to create legislation that would allow a person to slaughter an animal in their backyard and sell it to neighbors, not Walmart and not, Kroger's, but to sell, to at least if I want to come to your farm, look around, smell around, ask around, and as two voluntary consenting adults exercise our freedom of choice to exchange, money for a T-bone steak, we should be able to do that. And so this was obviously a pretty aggressive position for a liberal Democrat who tends to like government. And so he asked me to come and lobby one day in the General Assembly building with him, one-on-one. The two of us would go around and meet people to try to lobby for his bill. He put this bill in to kind of allow a freedom of commerce between friends and neighbors of inspected food, of otherwise, illegal food. And so we did that for a day, and I'll never forget it. It was so interesting I've lobbied before, but not as the invited guest of an elected politician. Okay. Normally they see me coming, they run the other way. Right. And so here I was as an elected politician's friend, okay, coming in, one-on-one. And of course he had an in because it wasn't me going, it was another, they defer to each other. It's a fraternity. And so we were able to get in, talk to people that, I would never be able to get in and talk to. Loved it. It was so interesting. We got back to his office. We spent, I don't know what, 7 hours, going from office to office. He had a checklist, and we got back to his office. At the end of the day, I was wiped out. I said, man, Albert, I feel like that if we could have half an hour with every one of these people, we didn't convince everybody. Okay. I said, but because most of them only gave us, we had like 5 minutes, but we made a lot of progress. Even with ones who we started with that were a little bit, reluctant. I said, Albert, I think if we had 30 minutes with every single person today, every one of them would be on our side. He said, you are exactly right. But that's not the way this building works. This building being the General Assembly office building. Yeah. He said the way this building works is, never forgotten it, so succinct and precise. He said the way this building works is we get 1,000 bills submitted every session. We're here for 60 days, and so the whole goal is how fast do I decide which side I'm on and move to the next one. It's not about solving problems. It's not trying to punch through. It's not helping anybody. All it is how fast can I decide which side I'm on and get to the next bill. And I was really depressed after that. That was sad to know that's the way. But he's right, and that's why nothing ever gets fixed and nothing ever gets solved, is because nobody's actually spending time sitting down to talk through it or try to resolve it. It's all about which side are you on? Tell me so I know whether you're an enemy or a friend. That's the way it is. And I don't know what got me on that.
That sounds like an overwhelming task for a politician.
Well, you got me on it with Ty Lopez. And so the point is there is a lot of stuff that's not black and white. In fact, probably much of stuff in life is not black and white. The decisions you make. Do we move? Do we not move? Do I work for this guy, that guy? Do I launch this business, that business? Think about all the things that aren't black and white in our lives. And so exposing ourselves to disparate views is one of the best ways to come to a place of reasonable assessment of a situation.
Yeah, fantastic. And if we could do that, that would be, be even more fantastic.
We'd be in a different world. We sure would. Because who wants polluted water? Who wants juvenile delinquents? At the end of the day, we tend to want similar things, but the route to get there is as divergent as night and day a lot of times.
Yeah. There is something that I've got a lot of notes that I keep meaning to circle back on, but one thing that we're doing in thinking about this community project is partly the community, encountering people that we want to be with all the time. And it's harder in the cities, I find. And one of my worries is if I'm on this farm and, 20, 30 minutes outside of the nearest town, then will I have access to such a strong community or social life with opportunities as I would in a city? Maybe you could speak to like what the community is like on your farm.
It's a great question, because here, like I said, we have 25 people here that earn their salaries here from the farm. It's a pretty tight knit community. Not all of them live right here on the farm, but it's a pretty tight community. We spend a lot of time with each other. In fact, in the summer, we do have 25 people who actually live on the farm in the summertime. And we have a farm chef in the summer that comes during our stewardship program that cooks our evening meal for us May through September, so that we can all 25 of us eat communally every day together. It's a wonderful thing. Of course, we have lots of guests and different things. So yeah, it is a tight knit community. So here's the deal. I think that what you're trying to do, you're not creating a cloister. There's the big difference between creating a community of resiliency versus a
A hideout.
A cloistered abbey, if you will, okay,
Right.
a monastery, and I'm not disparaging the monastery. I'm just saying that the whole goal here is not to cloister and kind of, circle the wagons and be in our own little cave. The whole goal here is to have something that is so stable and secure and strong that it can thrive in a time of dysfunction, to create so that when the greater society feels hopeless and helpless, we can offer hope and help as a lighthouse, as a safe haven. And so our whole goal here on building our farm community here is not about looking inward. It's all about how do we build so much stability and structure that we can minister outward. And so as you think of, and so if I could be so bold, I will say that attitudinally, as we move into, because listen, you can't imagine how many people I've had this conversation with in the last 2 years that are, this summer was a steady stream of RVs through our farm of refugees from the city. A lot of them were California, New York, and they'd sold their place. They bought this RV. We're on a 3-month tour to find our place.
Wow.
And it was a steady stream of them all summer long. And of course, they read my stuff. They've heard of me, so they want to come here on their way. And what I find is, and in dealing with people, now I'm doing a lot of consulting for people who have bought land now, and they don't want to make a mistake, and so they hire me to come in and do a day or two of consulting, set up their roads, their ponds, their fences, where we're going to put stuff, and kind of design their labor and their all, kind of create the thing for them. And what I find is that the ones who are making this change out of fear and fleeing are not as successful as the ones who are making the change out of faith and proaction. In other words, the difference between reaction and proaction. And so if you're making this change because you're fearful of things, and I don't want to make it sound like fear is a bad. There are good things to be fearful of. All right, it's good to be fearful of the grizzly bear. When he comes and attacks you, that's a good thing. But in general, we want to override our fear with faith. That rather than running away from something, we're running to something. And I don't think I'm mincing words here. I think that attitudinally, look, it's kind of like, can I say the word COVID on this podcast?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So it's kind of like COVID. The single biggest way to destroy to suppress our immune system is to be fearful. When you're fearful, your immune system is at a lowest place when you're fearful. Okay. The way to elevate your immune system is to be in faith, to think, and I'm not being completely spiritual here. I'm just saying faith. Yes, we can punch through this. Okay, we can live through this. That's faith as well. Faith that this chair will hold me. Right. I don't come into the auditorium and check every chair to see if it'll hold me. By faith, I figured somebody made the chair so that it would hold me. Okay, and so it's not necessarily a spiritual thing. The fact is that we do have faith, and so one of the best ways that you can not get COVID is to just say, you know what? I don't care. What if I do get it? It's fine. I'm going to punch through it. I'm going to be fine. I'm not going to be one of those long haulers. I'm not going to be one of those who's bedridden. I'll have the sniffles for a couple of days and we'll go right on. And actually having that conversation with yourself in your head, I'm not going to live in fear. I'm going to live in faith. Yeah. So what if I get it? I'm just going to have some sniffles for a day and punch through it on the other side. That attitude adjustment in and of itself is like 90% of your immune factor. Mm-hmm. And so here we are in this, cultural jitters and dysfunction and concern, and people are frustrated. They're angry. They're fearful. And so I'm suggesting that you take, I understand, I get fearful and depressed and angry too, but take that the best you can, have a conversation with yourself and say, look, okay, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, and I'm fearful. All right, I recognize that. Now, what am I going to do about that? What I'm going to do about that is I'm going to take all of that emotional energy and I'm going to channel it into building a parallel universe. And I'm going to surround my people, myself with can-do people, positive people, capable people, honest people, authentic people, and we're going to build an alternative universe that is resilient and secure and stable and a great place to raise my kids and my legacy. And the people that can take their fear, frustration, and anger and channel it to that positive construction mode instead of the destruction mode, those are the people that will succeed in this. And I saw this, you're not as old as I am, but I saw this during all the crisis of Y2K. You probably remember Y2K, but you weren't maybe an adult at Y2, or I don't know how old you are. Maybe you're 60 and you just look 20, but anyway, at Y2K, I saw this. I actually was involved, peripherally with a couple of groups that, fled to the hills. We're all going to be in the, caveman status. And those groups, I mean, they didn't last a month. They didn't last because their whole reason for existence was fear. And so I applaud anybody that wants to, kind of create this community, neighbor, village, you call it whatever you want to. But I always encourage you, come at it with the right motives and the right attitude, the right spirit, or it will fly apart, because fear does not build things. Faith builds things.
Wow. Super powerful reminder. And I appreciate that.
I feel like you're getting a nice consultation, a nice community consultation session here.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And hopefully it helps a lot of people, because if everyone's thinking like I'm thinking, then
yeah. Well, I think you're thinking. I think the way you're thinking is just ubiquitous now in the culture. A lot of people they're stymied by it. They talk about it, but they don't know how to put feet to it. And so for you to actually kind of developing a relational game plan is certainly a step ahead of most people. So I applaud you for it and congratulate. And nobody wishes you greater success than I do. I think it's fantastic. And I'm looking for these enclaves of functionality. I just want to see them all over the place, because that's what's going to create the the patterns of educational, agricultural, spiritual, glue that holds things together. When if and when the Huns come and sack Rome.
Right. The hard part we're experiencing right now, I mean, we're just getting started, but is like, we're not living in the same county where we're buying the land. So it's this process of, looking at it remotely, calling people and trying to figure out what the right parcel is. But then eventually we just have to go and see each one. So it's a proximity sort of issue.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's always a problem. And, you just have to, be systematic about it. patient, and you have to have your checklist, and and move through it systematically, and not be in a, it's a catch-22 right now. I say you don't want to be in a hurry, but there's part of you that does want to be in a hurry, right?
Because everyone else wants to buy land too.
Yeah. And so, so go forward. I will tell you this, if I may encourage you with this, almost every single piece of land will respond to good care. Elliot Coleman, I'm sure you know who Elliot Coleman is, the Four Seasons. He's the guru of vegetable production, Four Seasons Harvest, new organic grower. He and I were talking one day. He's a little older than I am. He said, Joel, do you ever notice that the people who are kind of the gurus of our movement started without any money and on poor land? He's up there on the coast of Maine, where it's just a hardscrabble rock pile. Jean-Martin Fortier, he's in poor land. The Singing Frogs Farm in Petaluma, that wasn't good land. And they didn't have a bunch of money. There's something about hard land and no money that actually makes you creative enough to make things happen. And I'm so glad that we didn't have money and we had hard land, because it made us creative. We had to figure it out. And so you can get so anal on the piece of property that you never get started. It's paralysis by analysis, right? And so don't fixate on the perfect piece of property, because you'll never find one. There isn't one. It doesn't exist. I can assure you, it doesn't exist. So just get what seems as close, to usable, and go for it. And you'll be a lot farther ahead than if you wait another 3 years, waiting for the perfect place.
Yeah, good. That's a great reminder. Just start going, and then you can form the land. You had set up a good segue, and maybe we'll circle back now about the pandemic. And we've seen food shortages, supply chain issues, the price of food going up. And beforehand, we were chatting about, seeing how, maybe organic local food could actually be cheaper than what you're finding in Costco these days. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how the pandemic is sort of maybe evening the playing field for local production.
Sure. This is, when you ask me, what are you excited about? This is one of the things that I'm most excited about right now. And it developed actually about a month ago when a friend came back and they said, sirloin steak at Costco is $16 a pound. And our steak right here is $9 a pound, sirloin steak. I'm saying, well, my goodness, here, we've always been a little higher priced than the supermarket. And here we are suddenly way cheaper. And so it got me to thinking, that's a bit of an epiphany, wow, suddenly, are we the cheaper price? And yes, we're seeing all these supply chain issues, price increases, and it struck me. So here's kind of where I am, as I break this down, analyze this now in the system. COVID has thrown an inefficiency monkey wrench in big organizations. The bigger the organization, the more sand is in the gears, if you will. You have more chances of somebody suing you because you didn't, as an employer, somebody suing you because you didn't provide the right, quarantine measures, the right protocol. He didn't take care of it. He didn't provide a hygienic safe room. There's all that. There's, and people are fearful. They're paranoid. And so from human resources departments to litigation to whatever, we're just seeing big organizations, whether they're businesses or whatever, but bigger organizations are like aircraft carriers in turbulent times. You need nimble. You don't want big. You want nimble. And so here we are as a small farm. We're not as dependent on petroleum because we don't use chemical fertilizer. We don't have an HR department. I don't wake up in the morning and wonder, well, oh no, who on my team is going to sue me for not providing them a hygienic safe room, yesterday. I don't wake up thinking about that kind of thing. And so the result is, since we run on real time carbon economy, on biology and not petroleum, energy costs, and we have a smaller outfit. We're a little speedboat. And so we can navigate these rocks and shoals in this disturbing period of time a lot easier than an aircraft carrier. And so the thought has struck me, are we actually entering a time where our kind of farming and our size of our farm type and farm scale, are we now sitting in the market driver's seat versus always having to justify our craft price, justify our inability to get this or that or do this or that in the marketplace? Are we now sitting more in the driver's seat, including the competitive price? And so that's a really exciting development, if that is actually the case. And so, when I'm trying to get 2 books printed, I've written 15 books. We're trying to get 2 books reprinted right now. And it used to only take 30 days, 30 days. You could tell them, I want this book reprinted, 30 days to be on your doorstep. Today it's 80 days, even 120 days. And I'm asking,
Wow.
What's the problem? So we can't get any paper. Can't get any paper. Why can't you get any paper? And so, well, because contactless retail, used to be people went in the store and they put stuff in a bag. Today, all that stuff has to go on a box on your doorstep. And so the cardboard market is literally eating up all of the pulp fiber market, and there's nothing left over for paper. And wow. So, you see these things. I mean, the president of the printing company called me and he explained this and emailed me. He didn't call me, emailed me. But the point is that when these macro things happen, the economy as envisioned, it's got a lot of fragility in it, just in time inventory, just in time everything. Actually, that means it's just in time also means it can't take very many shocks. That's the flip side of that. And so those are the time, that's the time that we're in. And I'm really bullish on the opportunities of the future as this becomes, quote unquote, the new normal, as little outfits like ours are better able to adjust and to navigate to this new normal.
Yeah. And I'm also appreciating, that finally sort of pricing is aligning with values. Cause I think always people would, say, I prefer an egg from a happy chicken or meat from a happy cow. But if it's such a difference in price, and now it's the opportunity for people to say, wow, everything about this whole system is in alignment with what I am wanting.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Fantastic.
And you don't have the price, whatever, the price prejudice that you had before. And I mean, we're seeing it all over. I mean, President Biden, in his press conference back on Monday, he said, man, I found out that ground beef was $5 a pound at the store. And he's just, having this meltdown that, hamburgers $5 a pound. And suddenly, if that's the stuff at the cheap supermarket, it suddenly makes our $7 a pound, which seemed high when hamburger was, $2.50 a pound. suddenly the jump from 5 to 7 is not that much. And it might even, go to 6 or 7. And so, yeah, it's an exciting time. We're just watching it every day, because every day there's, some new development, some new protocol that the big guys are supposed to adjust to. Now we need vaccine passports. Now we need this. We don't do any of that here. We do nothing. Okay. We don't mask. We don't, you can wear a mask if you want to, but it's like that entire news feed world. We just ignore it. And think of how much time and energy is spent now in big organizations, big bureaucratic organizations and companies, wrestling and dealing and having focus groups and trials and experiments and protocols and new sheets up on the mirror in the bathrooms. And, think of how much time is being spent on this. We're spending zero on it. Zero. To us, that world doesn't even exist.
Wow. Sounds like a breath of fresh air. And it's reminding me of the conversation about the fires and how an unwieldy sort of overgrown system could, build up. The fragility of the system could build up and it could be burned down. And it seems like the pandemic is like a fire-like force, just burning down inefficiencies to some analogy.
Well, that's good. You know what? I've never heard that said that way. You just had
never thought it before.
That's a profound. Yes. We have built up all of this gunk, with bureaucratic regulatory meddling, in business, in government and all that. And maybe this is, do you mind if I use that? I might use that somewhere. That's really good.
Yeah, use it. Good analogy. Boy,
now it's burning down. It's burning up. So this is a refreshing mm-hmm. of life, of the culture. That's a good thing.
Yeah, and it just also that spin can take maybe people out of fear and into optimism.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't touched on or I haven't asked you about that you think is important?
No, I think, we could talk for days if we wanted to. I can't help but give a little bit of a shout out to one of probably the single biggest change that or opportunity, positive opportunity that COVID has brought us here at the farm is, up until COVID, I was traveling all over the world doing seminars and stuff. And as you know, conferences have pretty much died. Nobody wants to go to a Marriott, a Sheraton, a Hilton. So back in the fall of 2020, we got to thinking, I wonder how many billions of dollars are out there just floating from Sheraton, Marriott, and Hilton for things for conferences that aren't happening. And so we decided, let's dibble our foot in the water here a little bit, and let's let our farm here at Polyface be a platform. If a group wants to get together, an outfit wants to get together and have a gathering, we let's see if we can provide them a place. They can be out. They can be not under HVAC conference center rules and air, and we can provide them the best food and blah blah blah. And so we put that out. And last year we did 6 of these. They were fantastic, very well received. People went out of here levitating. We've already got 6 scheduled for this summer, and we just are real excited about the idea of having farms develop for farms to become the new nexus of food, information, and fellowship. Food, information, and fellowship, and the place where people meet to exchange those things. Food, information, and fellowship. And it can be a brand new income stream for farmers. and it can provide an alternative, gathering point, water hole, whatever, right? For people in the greater culture. And so we're real excited about it. Our website will be announcing the ones that we're having this summer soon. This is just a very, a closeted plug. But anyway, we're trying to get a protocol set, a checklist set, so that this can be duplicated on lots of farms around the country. You don't need to go to an urban conference center. Hey, let's all collect out here on the farm, and the farmer can help stay in business, and we can gather in a safer, more enjoyable place, and why not let farmers enjoy some of that money that's flowed into the hospitality industry, and let us have a new, synergistic enterprise.
Yeah. That's perfect. This plan that we have includes, a retreat center being able to host some number of people. And, it sounds fantastic. And I'm happy you discovered that.
Yes.
Great. Well, Joel, thank you so much for coming on the show. Quick notice and sharing so many stories and your expertise and everything you're doing in the world, the leadership you show so many people. Really just want to acknowledge you for that. And thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on. It's been delightful, and thank you for your all of your savvy to be able to to put this together. And I really wish you well in this community development. I hear your heart in that. I applaud you, and I hope that the right people at the right place at the right time will come together, and you'll be able to do great things. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm excited to share this interview with the rest of our team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.